All right, so this is point slope form. The reason it's called point slope is because you need one point and a slope. All right, the point comes into play here. The x from your point goes here. The y from your point goes here. The slope, you plug in for m. All right, so that's what we're going to do on example 1. We're going to write the equation in point slope form. It gave me the point. It gave me the slope. I have everything I need. So I'm going to follow the equation exactly as it says. So I'm going to put a y minus, actually let me change the pen. So I'm going to put y minus, and then I'm going to put the y value from my point. Well, the y value from my point is a -7. Then I put equals, and then I'm going to plug in for my m, my slope, which is -1/4. Okay, and then I'm going to put a parenthesis x minus. And then I'm going to plug in for the x from my point. The x from my point was a +4. Okay, I'm not going to leave it like this because that's a double negative, which is not proper. So a double negative we know is a positive. So that's y plus 7 equals -1/4 times x minus 4. So this is how you write the equation in point slope form. Okay, one thing you might notice is your y was a -7 and we ended up putting a +7. That's opposite, right? Same thing for your x. Our x was a +4 and we ended up having a -4. Those are opposite. So the way I like to think of this is I put my y, I put y, and then I put the opposite y from my point equals the slope. Then I put a parenthesis x, and then I put the opposite of the x from my point. So let's do that one this way. So x, y. I know I'm going to write y, and then I look at the y from my point. It's a +9, so I'm going to do the opposite and write a -9. Then we're going to put equals, and we're going to plug in our slope, which in this case is 2. We're going to write our parentheses and then write x, and then we're going to look at the x from our point. It's a -3, so the opposite is 2 plus 3. And that is your equation in point slope form. So on example 1, it gave me a point and a slope, and we wrote the equation. So on example 2, it's giving me the equation in point slope form, so I'm going to write down what is our point and what is our slope. So our point. To get the x, we look by the x. By the x, I see a -2. So remember, think opposite. Since I see a -2, my x value is a +2. To get the y, I look by the y. I see a +1. The opposite of a +1 is a -1. So that's the point. Slope. Slope came in front of our, after our equal sign, in front of our parentheses. So my slope is 5. So let's find our point. Remember, think opposite. So to find x, look by the x. I see a +5, so the opposite would be a -5. To find the y, we look by the y. I see a +3, so the opposite would be a -3. All right, so now we find our slope. To find slope, we look after the equal sign and in front of the parentheses, so my slope is 1/2. All right, moving on. Okay, example 3 wants me to write the equation in point slope form. So remember, that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And I'm going to plug in for y1, m, and x1. So if point slope, I need a point and I need the slope. Well, I have 2 points, so that's covered. I do not have the slope, so I'm going to use my 2 points to find it. So that's when we put our fraction bar with the minus on top and bottom. We know y's rise, so this 1 goes on top. The -3 has to drop below it. Next point. This y has to go on top, which is a 4, so that 6 has to drop below it. All right, from here we calculate. That's going to come out to be, that's going to give you a -3 on the top. On the bottom, that's going to give you a -9, which reduces to a +1/3. So that's your slope. So now we have our slope. We're going to pick one of our points. It does not matter. I'm going to pick this point right here. Put a box around it so I know which one I'm using. So I'm going to write y, and then look at the y from my point. My y is a positive 1, so I'm going to put a minus 1. Equals. Next comes our slope, which we calculated to be 1/3. Parenthesis x, and then we look at the x from our point. Our x is a -3, so I'm going to put a +3. So this is the equation in point-slope form. Okay, now it's asking me to change this into y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to take this and rewrite it down below. One thing you should notice, in y equals mx plus b, there are no parentheses. So to get rid of the parentheses, I'm going to distribute, which means multiply. 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. 1/3 times 3 is a positive 1. This y minus 1 on the other side will drop down. Another thing you should notice is that y is all by itself, which means I need to get rid of this minus 1. So I'm going to have to put +1 to both sides. That cancels, so I have y equals 1/3 x, 1 plus 1 is a positive 2. Okay, so this is our equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. Well, remember, your b is your y-intercept. So I know my y-intercept is a positive 2, so I'm going to write that here. So it goes in the y position when x is 0. All right, so I'm going to go plot this. So on the y-axis, I'm going to go put a dot at 2. Okay, slope tells me how to move from point to point. Well, my slope was 1/3, so I know I need to rise 1, run 3. So I'm going to go up 1 over 3. New dot. Do it again. Up 1 over 3. And then I'm going to keep doing it. Okay, so I was able to fit 4 points. I'm still looking for my x-intercept. None of these are on this x-axis, so I'm going to have to put it in reverse. So if I'm going to go put it in reverse, I'm going to have to do everything backwards, which means I'm going to do the opposite of this. So instead of going up 1, right 3, I'm going to go down 1, back 3. So from here, down 1, back 3. Down 1, back 3. And then keep doing it. Okay, so now I can see where one of my points crosses the x-axis. And if you count, I can tell that that's at -6. So I know I'm going to put the -6 in the x position when y is 0. Okay, on example 4. Same thing. Write an equation of point slope. I have points, so that's good. I just need to calculate my slope. So xy, xy. Remember, y's rise, so start like this. The y goes on top, the x drops below it. So 1 on top, -10 below it. Okay, y goes on top, so -7 on top, the 6 goes below it. So when I calculate this, on top I get an 8, on the bottom I get a -16. So when I simplify, that becomes a -1/2. That is my m, my slope. So it does not matter which point we use, so I'm going to go ahead and box in this first one. So to write the equation, I write y, then I look at my y value. My y value is a positive 1, which means I'm going to put a -1 equals. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my slope, which we calculated to be a -1/2, parenthesis x. After I write x, I look at our x value, which is a -10, so I put the opposite, which is a positive 10. Okay, this is our equation in point-slope form. So now we're going to change this into y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to rewrite it so I can work on it. I know y equals mx plus b does not have parentheses, so I'm going to multiply, distribute to get rid of it. -1/2 times x is -1/2 x. Then I'm going to take -1/2 and I'm going to multiply it by a positive 10. That's going to give me a -5. This y minus 1 on the other side drops down. Okay, remember we want y by itself, so to get rid of a -1, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That cancels. Y drops down. My -1/2 x drops down. And I know that negative 5 plus 1 is a negative 4. So this is y equals mx plus b. So I know that this is my b, my y-intercept, which tells me down here that negative 4 goes in the y position when x is 0. So I'm going to start by graphing my y-intercept. So on the y-axis, I'm going to go down 4 and put a dot. Slope tells us how to move, so my slope is a negative 1/2. Because it's a negative, I know I need to go down 1, right 2. So down 1, right 2. And I'm going to keep doing that. Down 1, right 2. Okay, so I was able to put several points. Remember, we're looking for the x-intercept. None of these are on the x-axis, which means I'm going to have to put it in reverse and go backwards, which means I'm going to have to do the opposite of this. So instead of going down 1, I'm going to go up 1, back 2. So up 1, back 2. And then keep doing that. Up 1, back 2. Oops, no, my bad. All right, so now I can see where it crosses. It crosses at negative 8, so I know that goes in the x position, comma, when y is 0. Okay, it gives me an equation in point-slope form, and it's asking me to graph it. I had some students that wanted to convert it to y equals mx plus b, which you could, but you'd be doing unnecessary work because in point-slope form, I know the point, and I know a slope, and that is enough to graph. So remember, to find your point, you look by your x to get x. By my x, I see a plus 2, so we remember to do the opposite. The opposite of a plus 2 is a negative 2. And I know to get my y, I look by my y. By my y is a minus 4, so the opposite is a positive 4. My slope is after the equal sign and in front of the parentheses, so my slope is a negative 1. All right, so let's go plot our point, negative 2, 4. My slope is a negative 1, so I know that's going to tell me how much to rise and how much to run. But uh-oh, it's not a fraction. We can turn any number into a fraction by putting it over 1, which tells me it's going to need to go down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. And then I'm going to keep putting dots as far as I can. One thing that we're going to add is the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So I can see my points on the x-intercept and the y-intercept, which is why I didn't have to go backwards. Okay, so for the x-intercept, I look at the x-axis, and it crosses right here at 2. So I know the x goes in the x position when y is 0. To find my y-intercept, I look at the y-axis. I can see it crosses right here, also at 2. But since this is the y-intercept, I'm going to put it in the y position when x is 0. Last problem. It gives me a point. It gives me a slope. So that's perfect. I'm going to go graph 3, 3. And then I'm going to use slope to tell me how much to rise and how much to run. So from here, I know I need to go up 1, right 2. So up 1, right 2. And then keep doing that. Up 1, right 2. Okay, so I'm going to ask for the x and y-intercept again. So the points that we put were not enough. I can't see it where it crosses the y or the x, so we're going to have to put it in reverse, which means do everything backwards. So instead of going up 1, right 2, I'm going to go down 1, back 2. Down 1, back 2. Down 1, back 2. And we're going to keep doing that. Okay, so I can see that it crosses my x-axis right here at negative 3. So I know my x-intercept, put it in the x position when y is 0. Okay, so to find our y-intercept, I noticed that we didn't put any dot on the y-intercept, so it's not perfect. And some of y'all could probably figure out what it is on your own, but if not, it could be tough to figure out exactly where does it cross at. So to figure that out, I wanted to show you all that cool calculator trick, where we can graph and find it. So we needed an equation of some type. Since it gives me a point and a slope, I'm going to write my equation in point-slope form. So I'm going to write my y, and I'm going to look at my y value. My y value is a positive 3, so I put minus 3 equals. After the equal sign comes your slope, followed by a parenthesis in x. Once we write x, we look at our x value. It's a positive 3, so I'm going to write a minus 3. All right, so this is my equation. So I'm going to go graph that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So when you add your graph, I'm going to graph y minus 3. You can't graph y minus 3 because, remember, this means y equals. Well, we have y minus 3 equals, not the same thing. So I don't want this. So to be able to graph a point-slope equation, I have to press delete on the equal, and this box pops up. I want us to pick relation, 6 relation. When I do that, an empty box appears. So I can type in my equation exactly as I see it. Y minus 3 equals 1/2 x minus 3. Press enter. Okay, so if you graph in relation, the table does not work. Watch, Control T. Oh well, because we learned how to use trace, which is very similar to table. So I'm going to press menu, 5, 1, and when I press trace, a little X pops up. This is where it will always start in trace, on the y-axis, so this is my y-intercept. So now I know my y-intercept is at 0, 1.5. So I'm going to add that on my paper, so make sure you do the same on yours. I'm writing on my paper right now that the y-intercept is at 0, negative 1.5. While we're on the graph, I want to check that we got our x-intercept correct. So I'm going to move my little x right here over here, because this is where it crosses the x-axis using this arrow. Remember, the word 0 will pop up, and I get my x-intercept is at negative 3, 0. And that is what we wrote right here, so I know that I did it correctly. All right, and that's it.